Hi everyone, welcome to the first ever TRI lecture on warrants. My name is Chen and I'll be your speaker today. Let's first take a look at what are warrants. A warrant can be defined as a reasoning or an explanation or a causation for whatever claim you're making. But simplified, it's basically the reasoning part of your argument and it's the because part of whenever you're speaking a sentence. Now, let's take a look at an example. So, on this argument, it says, cats are better than dogs because they have sharper claws. Let's take 10 seconds to try and identify the warrant of this argument. So, what did you get? Well, the actual answer is that the warrant part is because cats have sharper claws, therefore they are better than dogs. So you can see this sentence has the claim, cats are better than dogs. And then the warrant is the because part, because they have sharper claws. Now, let's take a look at this claim, Captain America is better than Iron Man because. Let's take 10 seconds to figure out a warrant or a reason as to why Captain America is better than Iron Man. There are multiple reasons as to why Captain America can be better than Iron Man, but what I came up with was that Captain America is better than Iron Man because Captain America has better leadership skills. Again, the claim here is that Captain America is better than Iron Man, and the warrant, the because part, is because Captain America has better leadership skills. Now, let's take a look at why warrants are important. First of all, remember that warrants are the foundation of every argument. An argument consists of claim, warrant, and impact. A claim is basically what claim you're making. For example, cats are better than dogs, Captain America is better than Iron Man. A claim cannot stand without a warrant because there's no reasoning as to why the claim is true. And then there's the impact, why your argument matters. Again, an argument cannot be impactful if there's no reasoning behind it, which is why it is important to note that whenever you're making an argument or a claim, you must have a warrant because it's the most important part of the argument. Second of all, it is also important to keep in mind that there can be multiple warrants inside an argument. For instance, you can have multiple reasons for why Captain America is better than Iron Man. You can have multiple warrants as to why cats are better than dogs, which is why it brings me to my next point, that you must keep in mind that as the person making the argument, that you need to make sure you're choosing the best warrant for your argument. This not only makes your argument much more persuasive, but second of all, you can also make sure that your argument or your warrant is not easily refuted. Now, speaking of refuting arguments, there are always times where we're in normal everyday conversation or we're hearing something in class or we're listening to something in our curriculum and we feel like the warranting or the reasoning there is not as credible. So, how do we actually question a warrant? As a debater myself, I would ask myself 4 key questions when I'm faced with a fishy warrant. The first question I would ask myself is this warrant true? This is pretty simple, whether this warrant is factually correct. And second of all, is this warrant relevant? Does the person making the argument provide enough context or provide enough uniqueness, or in other words, urgency, to make this warrant actually important or relevant? Or moreover, does this person making the argument provide enough implications as to why their argument is important, which is why you need all of these factors to make sure a warrant is relevant. And third of all, are there better alternatives to this warrant? Like mentioned before, there can be multiple warrants to a certain argument or a claim, which is why it is that person's job making the argument that they need to provide the best warrant. If not, someone else can provide a better warrant and argue that their warrant is better than their person's. And fourth of all, and most importantly, can this warrant help my side in any way? A warrant can go both ways. Because of different ways you can implicate out a warrant can normally act on both sides during a debate or a conversation. Now, let's take a look at the claim we used before. Cats are better than dogs because they have sharper claws. Let's use the 4 key questions we can ask ourselves. First of all, is this factually correct? Is it factually correct that cats have sharper claws than dogs? Well, it is not always that cats have sharper claws than dogs because dogs also have pretty sharp claws. It would be the person making the argument's job to provide some evidence that backs up whatever claim or warrant they're making. Second of all, is this argument relevant, or is this warrant relevant? Well, realize that here there are a few problems. First of all, there's not enough context as to what this argument is making. But second of all, and more importantly, there's not enough implication as to what cats having sharper claws mean. Which is why when there's no implication here, we can argue that instead this argument is not relevant. But if you were to make this argument relevant and provide an implication, the argument would be cats are better than dogs because they have sharper claws, hence making it easier for them to hunt down rats. But now, third of all, is this the best warrant? Are there better alternatives? At the top of my head, there are other reasons as to why cats are better than dogs, because maybe they can clean up themselves, they're more quiet, they're easier to tame with litter boxes. All of these would be reasons as to why cats are better than dogs, and it is your job as a person in a conversation or a debater to find out what the best warrant is and what's the easiest warrant to go for that makes your argument persuasive but also not easily refuted. Fourth of all, and most importantly, can this warrant be advocating for something else? Well, realize that if we were debating cats versus dogs and the person on the cat side were arguing that cats are better than dogs because they have sharper claws, I, on the dog side, would make the argument that instead cats having sharper claws also means that they are worse than dogs because it means that they can be harming their own owners. This is called turning your opponent's argument because you're using their own warrants to create offense onto their side. This is really important because when you're using your opponent's warrant to go on their side, you're not only generating defense on this argument, but also you're creating offense and pressure to respond to this argument onto your opponent's side. Now, let's put a quick summary as to what we have talked about today. A warrant is the because part or the explanation and the reason as to why your argument is true. Next, you need to remember that the warrant is the most important part of an argument because a claim itself cannot stand without a warrant, nor can an argument be impactful without a reason. And third of all, remember that every claim such as Captain America is better than Iron Man or cats are better than dogs can have multiple warrants. And it is important because it's the person who's making the argument's job to find out what's the best warrant for their argument. Fourth of all, remember that when you're not making an argument, you can also question your opponent's or someone else's warranting in different ways. And there are 4 key questions we present here. First of all, is this warrant true? Second of all, is this warrant relevant? Third of all, are there better alternatives to this warrant? Is this the best warrant your opponents can be using? Or fourth of all, can this warrant be instead be advocating for something else that we can make an argument out of? Thank you for attending today's lecture, and we hope to see you in future videos.